the country doing well, but I'm also looking out here in Ohio. And then this next person we're going to be bringing on, Donovan O'Neil. He is the Ohio State Director for Americans for Prosperity, and AFP is one of the most active grassroots policy organizations in the country. And here in Ohio, they've been deeply involved in debates over taxes, government spending, and accountability at the State House. And I am excited to find out what else they're going to be working on. Donovan, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here.
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me. Always good to be in beautiful Northeast Ohio.
That's right.
On the air.
It is. It's cold, but it's beautiful. We'll take it. We'll take the compliment. We don't get many around this time of year. So let me ask you for the listeners. You know, they may have heard of Americans for Prosperity, or AFP. They may know the name, but what is the mission, and what do you stand for?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. We're the nation's largest conservative, right-of-center grassroots organization. Here in Ohio, we put a megaphone to the voices of Ohioans who are frustrated with the direction of our country. We do that through our Buckeye Blueprint. That's our vision for a bolder, better Buckeye state. How do we do that, Jake? Well, we do that through grassroots activism, by building communities across all 88 counties in the state, working to move Ohio from middle in the Midwest to number one in the nation on things like economic opportunity, education freedom, energy abundance, and something that so many folks are talking about these days: how do we modernize Ohio government?
And that's really the hard part. And I love grassroots movements, and I love that you talk about getting all the different counties involved, because, you know, when I worked with Make America Healthy Again, the big issue that I saw was that you would have people who, you know, live in California trying to talk about the issues that people are facing in Illinois. It's like you don't know. You know, you don't know what this county's facing, or you don't know what that city's facing unless you talk to people there. So when you're talking about getting everyone involved, that's a really big deal, and I think that's a point that gets overlooked by a lot of these grassroots organizations, is that they don't talk to everybody who is actually on the ground, who live in that area, and people feel like they get ignored, and sometimes the real issues don't get addressed. And that's why I love. Can you tell us a little more about the Buckeye Blueprint?
Yeah, well, and, you know, to that point, and we have a lot of folks who are activists, who identify as activists with Americans for Prosperity, who also, like you, involved in that MAHA movement. And for many of them, it's sort of a wake-up moment, right? And you get a lot of folks who are frustrated, you know, and as I say, they turn on the TV or tune into the radio, they throw the remote at the TV, and instead of doing that, what we give them the opportunity to do when they see their property tax bill going up, or they learn about something their child is being taught in a public school that doesn't align with their values, is instead of throwing your remote at the TV or crumpling the paper up and throwing it away, put your shoes on, go out your door, get in your car, turn it on, drive down to an AFP County chapter meeting and join us, because there we're actually taking action in a meaningful way, right? Not just being angry about the situation that's going on or the policy issue we disagree with, but giving people real opportunities to learn how to engage with their senators, representatives, both in the district and in Columbus, or even on the Hill in Washington, D.C. And so at the core of this Buckeye Blueprint, it's providing folks with a roadmap, a blueprint, if you will, really, of ways to take action and make a difference in their community on the things that they deeply care about.
All right, so now I got to ask you about, we got some deadlines coming up. We got some important things coming up. So I want to make sure people are aware of it, and I want them to know what AFP stands to, what they plan on doing. So January 30th, that's the funding deadline and the energy permitting reform. So we have that deadline. It's coming up. What does AFP see, why does AFP see this as a real opportunity to finally advance things when it comes to energy?
Well, you know, a year ago, yesterday, President Trump took office, and one of the first executive actions he signed, among a lot, if you remember the marathon executive action sessions.
He was a busy guy.
Undoing Bidenomics was quite a remarkable time.
Yeah.
One of those executive actions, among many, was regarding permitting, was regarding the sort of green energy Bidenomics approach to energy here in this country that was really focused more on a scarcity approach to energy policy making rather than an abundance approach to energy policy making. And so the executive office did its work, identified where the pain points are and problems are, sent that to the legislative branch, just like the founding fathers envisioned this would work. The House of Representatives has passed two bills, Speed Act and Permit Act. I can drop into those here in just a minute for you, Jake, if you want. But what those two bills do, but those two bills have been passed in the House of Representatives, are over with the Senate right now, and we've got an opportunity, right, to get these bills passed that would streamline permitting processes, unleash energy abundance, and really move us from this era of a focus on scarcity and so-called renewable forms of energy and move us into an abundance and reliable form of energy approach to policymaking here in the country, bringing down costs for Americans on both their home heating and cooling bills, as well as manufacturing and creating an environment where we can do the things we know our politicians promise us that they can do.
Politicians' promise is as good as a $2 bill. That's what I say to that. But so the big thing that I see with these are the permits, and it's delaying people from being, or companies I should say, to actually be able to start to really dig in and find new ways. How long are these permit processes, and why is it holding up everything?
Well, we actually just released a study last week on this. That even just here in Ohio, I know you like to talk local. Here in Ohio, federal permitting delays had stalled or killed 3 major energy projects here in Ohio, costing 700 jobs, $1.5 billion in economic benefits. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, if the dead jobs aren't enough and the rising costs aren't, or the lack of economic growth isn't enough for you, made energy more costly for consumers like you and I. What these timelines mean, right? If you're an investor, it's just simple stuff, really. If you're an investor and you're looking at making a multi-billion-dollar investment in a small modular nuclear reactor or bringing a 2-cycle natural gas power plant online, which, by the way, we haven't done in about 5 years here in Ohio, you want to know that you're going to get answers on that investment, right? And when these permits go into the black hole of the federal bureaucracy and you don't know when you're going to get an answer, well, that makes it really hard for an investor who's looking to get a return on that, let alone a business or company looking to get the projects, shovels into the dirt and projects going. That creates a problem. And so what these bills will do, right, is create those shot clocks. We've done it here in Ohio with House Bill 15, created requirements that the regulatory agencies like the Ohio Power Siting Board and PUCO get answers to the people who deserve them. Even if it's a no, Jake, right? At least you know where you stand and can begin to do the work to go either take your project somewhere else or get it going. Ideally, though, you get an answer, it's a yes, and we get these shovels into the ground and we get this energy online so we can have a more have greater abundance in energy here in this country.
And so let me ask you, when it comes to, we could zoom out a little bit. Let's look at for the whole country. If the Senate fails to act with this January 30th deadline, what does that mean for U.S. energy dependence and the long-term competitiveness?
Well, I think it begins to, we've been talking about this for a while, and so this January 30 deadline is a little bit arbitrary, quite candidly, right? That is when the continuing resolution that was passed in December to reopen the government comes due, and, everybody operates well under a deadline. Nobody better than Congress operates better under a crisis, and so looking at this January 30th deadline and saying, okay, look, it's been over a year since President Trump said we need to get this done. We have Republican majorities in the House and the Senate that can do this, and an executive who's willing to sign, and even our Democrat friends understand the impact because they too have energy bills they have to pay, or donors with businesses that are seeing energy costs skyrocket. We can get this done, and this isn't controversial stuff either, right? It's just saying making sure that the executive agencies, the bureaucrats who oftentimes operate out of control and decide to interpret the laws broadly, have more narrowly defined constraints on what they can do, have timelines on when they need to get back to approving these permits, and at the end of the day, streamline a lot of the review stuff so we eliminate duplication. If you got to take your piece of paper to Department A and then you go take it to Department C, but before you go there, you got to stop at Department D and get a check so you can go to Department B.
Right.
I mean, it's the labyrinth that is the federal bureaucracy. This legislation streamlines and cleans a lot of that gunk up that just has built up over the last 50 years or so of proliferation in the bureaucratic state.
Well, let's hope they could do it. That's the problem with it, because you got to sit there. You got to go, well, we'll see if they get to it. It would be nice if they did it. Let me ask you. Vice President J.D. Vance, he's in Toledo tomorrow, and they're saying that he's going to talk about the administration's economic record. What do you think actually drives the real economic growth and affordability?
Well, and if there's a blueprint on this, because I share your skepticism of Congress being able to get anything done. There's a framework for this, though. We got the working families tax cuts done. We made permanent the 2017 Trump tax cuts.
Yeah, that's true.
They delivered on the president's promises of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, among a litany of other things that were able to be included in this beautiful bill. And with having J.D. Vance back in Ohio tomorrow, Thursday in Toledo, I think he's going to talk about affordability, a strong economy, and a secure economic future. And that's really what, if you wind the clock back to November of 2024, when, Republicans were elected, voters rejected Kamala Harris, voters sent Sherrod Brown packing and delivered a strong Republican majority in the House of Representatives. What voters were voting on was Bidenomics. It was a referendum on the top-down economic policies that had made everything from bread and milk to gasoline more expensive in this country. You don't get that done overnight, but good, sound, foundational economic policy like the working family tax cuts that puts money in the pockets of Ohioans and Americans, not the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. I'm hopeful that's the stuff J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, is going to be talking about when he's in Toledo, because that also is an important battleground part of the state, with Marcy Kaptur still being in office up there despite continually voting against the best interests of her constituents.
Yeah, she's a whole other topic for a whole other show. That's the best way I can say that. And I think you're right. We went through it yesterday, because yesterday was 1 year. And, Seth and I, we kind of broke down the top 10 points of, what were the main things that President Trump talked about in the inaugural speech. And of the 10 things, we had 7 of them in progress or started. And I think you're spot on with what you're saying. People are forgetting that a dozen of eggs, you were almost paying $1 per egg. It was that bad. And it's easy to complain, and it's easy to look at it and go, well, now it's $5 for a dozen of eggs. Well, it's a lot better than 12. And, there's a process that goes along with this, and it does take time. What from AFP's perspective, what are the policies that most working families are focused on right now?
Well, and I appreciate you asking that. And one of the things we do a lot of is we go out and we actually knock doors. We talk to voters door to door. We've cleared about 80,000 doors in just the last 3 or 4 months. So even in the cold weather, we've been out there pounding the pavement, hearing from Ohioans on what they care about. The top things that we hear, affordability, economic opportunity, right? What people are paying, it's making life unaffordable, and they want to see policies that are going to fix that. With that comes healthcare. Price of healthcare is skyrocketing. Healthcare premiums rise year over year, and it's not because of Republicans' oppositions to Obamacare. In fact, it is the votes that Democrats continually take to force Obamacare on people, force them into a broken healthcare marketplace that has made these costs skyrocket since that bill was first enacted. The other area that we hear a good bit about after you get through sort of the affordability, which impacts so many folks, is energy costs. As we talked about at the top of the segment, people are seeing their utility bills skyrocket. If you're a business owner, you're seeing your costs skyrocket in manufacturing and other industries. And so I think, if you got to sum it all up, it really does come down to affordability. And there's a two-path approach here. You can go down the path that we've been through the Obama and Biden era, which was more top-down control, more regulations, Bidenomics, 101 type stuff, or we can go down the approach that we've been in the last 12 months and we were during Trump 45, which was unleashing economic opportunity, lowering taxes, cutting red tape and regulations, curbing government spending, the kind of stuff that actually puts the money back in the pockets of Americans and helps them propel themselves forward. Now, the challenge for us, Jake, is communicating that message on a door, right, with the voter who is being bombarded with different talking points through the media they might be consuming. But what we find, right, and why we go and do those doors is there's no better way to cut through the noise than having one Ohioan talking to another about the issues that matter, hearing them out, understanding where that person at the door is coming from, and then helping connect them to why the policies that John Husted, Bernie Moreno, others are enacting, right, in support of the Trump agenda to make this country much better than it was just 12 months ago.
Well, yeah, and conversation is that's what trumps everything. Just sitting there talking to someone, because even if there is a disagreement at first, you can understand where they're coming from, and once you understand it, then you can be like, well, actually, you might want to look into this candidate, or in these laws that they're going to vote on, or this ballot issue, because it could help you, and this is why. When you understand where they're coming from, and you get that through conversation, you can really start to change people's minds. Something else that is on the mind of Ohioans is tax season, because we're getting ready to head into tax season, and AFP has been highlighting the working family tax cuts. What are those delivering for Ohioans right now?
Well, on average, $1,500 in savings for Americans. What you don't see, though, is what would have happened if Congress failed to act. If Congress failed to act, every American would have seen their tax bills go up, right, at the expiration of the 2017 Trump tax cuts. But what they're seeing now are increased tax credits for childcare. Working families are seeing tax cuts on tips and overtime, right? The no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime policies. Actually, I like to get a little ahead of the game. I'm a weird person who likes to do their own taxes. So I started getting some of that together the other night. The other part of this are those Trump accounts. I don't know how familiar you are with those, but beginning to create a fund that allows our children, I have 3 myself, to begin to invest in their future. As you go through the tax season, you have the opportunity to open those up and sort of begin to create a 401k, I guess. I'm not a tax professional. I might be the wrong way to describe it. But to me, it looks like a 401k, some type of investment vehicle that starts at a young age. And so when, my son Connor, who's 14 now, turns 18 in 4 years, he'll have a little bit of something to go and put down on a new car, or help pay for, career education, or even put it into a down payment on his first home. This kind of forward thinking, making sure that we're putting the money in the pockets of the people, not the bureaucrats in D.C. or the lobbyists and their special interests. That's the kind of stuff we're seeing in the working family tax cuts that I think as people file their taxes this year, they're going to appreciate, they're going to recognize, they're going to say, gosh, actually, I am better off than I was this time 12 months ago, thanks to the policies that my elected officials, Republican elected officials in particular, have been enacting.
Do you think that the Ohio lawmakers see that difference and they're committed to keeping those kind of the taxes low and affordable for families?
At the state level, I do. I believe that, because I see, we talk to them every day, our activists. We bring them to the state house or invite the elected official to a chapter of meetings that we will hold. There's a fundamental belief that this money is the people's money, not the government's money. And at the federal level, I think that's what we saw with the votes for the working families tax cuts, the votes that Senator Moreno and Senator John Husted took. It's a philosophical difference from our prior Senator, Sherrod Brown, where Sherrod Brown looked at this and said, this isn't your money, right? This is the money that the government will decide and distribute out to the people as it sees fit. Well, no, Senator Husted rejected that idea in voting for the working families tax cuts and said, no, this money actually is your money. You earned it in your paycheck. You keep it. You invested in your community. You invested in a back porch. You invested in a trip to Cedar Point with your family in the summer. Whatever you want to do with it, it's going to go better if it stays in the pockets and communities of the people of Ohio than it will in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, more money for the people, that's always the answer, because you see them, they start to, whether they realize it or not, they invest it into their community, and you start to see things move forward. AFP-Ohio, they've announced some endorsements. The one that I'm focused on is District 27. Why was it so important to engage in that race early on?
Well, yeah, and I'm excited to actually break the news here with you today, Jake. We're announcing our endorsement of current state representative Steve Demetrio. He's running for state senate in the 27th state senate district. Steve is a longtime Buckeye Blueprint champion. He's somebody that embodies a lot of the key policy reforms that we believe is going to move Ohio forward. 0% income tax, capping and reforming property taxes, empowering families with education opportunity, energy abundance. Steve was one of our first endorsements when we rolled these out about 4 years ago, and we're honored that he's upheld his pledges to us and our communities, that he would retain those principles through his 4 years as a state representative. And now we're excited to see him go to the Senate, and we're excited to stand alongside him in that potentially battleground state Senate district this November.
Well, Donovan O'Neil, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to talking to you again. There's so much I want to talk to you about, but we only have so much time.
We just have to make sure people know that Donovan will join us every Wednesday.
That's right, every Wednesday
At 9:35 to give us updates on what's going on.
That's right. So, yeah, every Wednesday, if you like what you're hearing, stay informed with Donovan O'Neil. Of course, he is the Ohio State Director of Americans for Prosperity, and I want to thank you for making time, and I'll talk to you again next week.
Jake, Seth, always good to be with you guys. Have a great rest of your week.
Yep, you
Thank
too.
you, sir.
Thank you. That, of course, Donovan O'Neil. He's going to join us every Wednesday, 9:35. He's with Americans for Prosperity.